Welcome back to the channel, dears viewers. If you might think a 1970 Lincoln 1-cent penny that rattles around in your jar of loose change is worth nothing more than its face value of 1 cent. You may overlook it, toss it into a coin machine, or spend it without a second thought because that's how pennies have functioned in everyday commerce for decades. But what if I told you that some 1970 pennies can be worth hundreds, thousands, and in extremely rare cases even far more than that because of tiny mistakes made during the minting process, subtle die varieties that escaped notice for decades, or exceptional surviving pieces in top condition? What if that humble penny, a small copper disc we barely give a second look, could be hiding a history of American history, industrial precision, mishaps, and collector passion, with values that dramatically outstrip its 1 cent face value? This is the full and fascinating history of the 1970 Lincoln penny, how its market value today differs wildly from its face value, and why errors, die varieties, mint mark quirks, and condition can make certain pieces profoundly valuable. In 1970, the United States Mint struck Lincoln cents across 3 facilities: Philadelphia, no mint mark; Denver with the letter D beneath the date; and San Francisco with S mint mark. The Denver Mint produced the highest number of Lincoln cents that year with about 2,891,438,900 coins, making the 1970 penny one of the most common Lincoln cents in existence. Because of this extraordinarily high mintage and because these coins were intended for everyday circulation, most 1970 pennies you find in pocket change today are common and worth their face value of 1 cent or only marginally more to basic collectors who want typical examples to complete date and mint sets. Typical circulated 1970 pennies are abundant and not scarce, so for most people their practical worth in commerce remains just a penny. However, within that sea of ordinary coins, there are rare survivors and unusual minting events that give certain specimens collectible value many times higher than face. The design of the Lincoln penny that year was well established. On the obverse, a portrait of President Abraham Lincoln gazes to the right, with the inscriptions, "In God We Trust," above, the date and mint mark beneath, and the word "Liberty" to the left. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial stretched across the coin represents unity, strength, and the nation's capital. This design had prevailed since 1959, when the Lincoln cent was updated from its original wheat reverse to the modern memorial reverse. The coin's composition in 1970 remained 95% copper with 5% zinc, a rich reddish composition that gives older pennies their distinctive color and appeal to collectors. In everyday circulation, these coins served their purpose as small monetary units, slowly wearing and accumulating smooth surfaces and scratches as they passed from hand to hand. Because so many 1970 pennies were produced, most coins in typical circulated condition remain close to face value today. In worn grades with obvious scratches, faded details, and dulled surfaces, the average 1970 can be worth as little as 1 cent to about a few cents when sold as part of a common date collection. For better preserved coins, particularly those with pleasing color or minimal wear, the value can rise modestly, perhaps a few cents to a couple of dollars, because collectors building basic sets want nicer examples than the roughest circulated pieces. Coins that have never circulated and retain original mint luster, particularly in red RD color designation with bright copper surfaces, can fetch higher premiums. In fact, a 1970 penny graded in MS65 red, a high uncirculated grade, is commonly listed at values around $20+ and can exceed that in rarer top conditions, illustrating how condition alone can add value above face even for common dates. The average 1970 Lincoln penny's value is estimated around a few dollars in typical uncirculated grades and up to around $21.49 or more in MS65 red condition, with higher certified grades commanding even more. This means while most 1970 pennies remain essentially pocket change, superb examples can be worth far more to thoughtful collectors. But numismatics is not only about condition. It's about histories and subtleties, about tiny differences forged by high-speed machinery that sometimes slipped from perfect execution. Coin collectors know that errors and minting anomalies, slight deviations from the intended design, can create rare survivors that are vastly more valuable than their face value. In the case of the 1970 Lincoln penny, several error types are known and documented, and while many are modest in value, others have auction histories that reach into the thousands or even more for extraordinary examples. One category of errors involves the strike-through or struck-through anomalies, where debris such as grease, cloth, or other foreign matter lay on the surface of the blank metal planchet when the die struck it. The result is a coin surface that shows unexpected impressions or raised marks where the die's normal detail was blocked or disturbed. These errors can be fascinating to collectors because they represent a fleeting moment when the minting process didn't go exactly as intended. Values for these types of errors vary widely based on how dramatic and appealing the error appears, the coin's condition, and collector demand, but they typically go for substantially more than face value, ranging from tens to hundreds of dollars for notable examples. Another error type is the off-center strike. This occurs when the blank planchet was not perfectly aligned when the dies struck it, leaving part of the design shifted toward one edge and blank metal visible on part of the surface. Off-center errors are graded not just by their existence but by how far off the strike occurred. A slight off-center of a few percent can add novelty value, but more pronounced off-center strikes where a large portion of the design is missing because the coin was struck far from center are more dramatic and fetch stronger premiums, often ranging from dozens to hundreds of dollars depending on severity and overall condition. Larger off-center examples may be especially sought after because they show an uncommon glimpse of how the coin might have looked if struck correctly but didn't. Among the most popular errors among collectors of Lincoln cents are wrong planchet strikes, where a blank intended for another denomination accidentally enters the press meant for pennies. A famous example across Lincoln cent collecting is when a cent design is struck on a planchet meant for another denomination like a dime or nickel. Such pieces show a dramatically different size and often a silvery color rather than the expected copper. Wrong planchet errors are very rare because multiple sorting steps usually prevent mismatches, but occasionally one escapes into circulation. These error coins from 1970 typically command hundreds or even low thousands of dollars in collector markets, particularly when the error is evident and the coin's surfaces remain appealing. Still another category involves multiple strike errors or broad strike errors, where the coin receives additional impacts from the dies or is struck outside the normal restraining collar, respectively. Multiple strikes create overlapping images or ghostly misaligned features that intrigue collectors, while broad strikes produce a slightly larger and flatter coin with a different edge appearance. Both types illustrate mechanical quirks and sometimes command modest to significant premiums based on their quality, rarity, and collectors' perception. In addition to these physical errors, there are also die varieties and mint mark anomalies that can affect value. For Lincoln cents, die varieties occur when the dies used to strike coins have slight differences, sometimes due to repunching of mint marks, changes in hub impressions, or subtle shifts during die manufacture. In the 1970 series, collectors have documented instances of repunched mint marks RPMs on 1970 D coins where the Denver mint mark D was struck more than one slightly off position, resulting in a doubled look mint mark. These varieties are subtle and require magnification to detect but are genuine mint issues that can add value. Typical strong repunched mint mark examples of 1970 D can sell for roughly $30 to $50 or more among specialists. Some collector guides also mention the so-called floating roof or no FG varieties on 1970 Lincoln cents, which involve die anomalies where parts of the Lincoln Memorial reverse appear detached or where the designer's initials are misplaced or missing. However, other numismatic sources caution that varieties like floating roof and weak FG initials are often the result of over-polished dies rather than true mint errors, and thus they hold more limited value compared to genuine structural anomalies. Despite the breadth of error types and varieties, it's essential to emphasize that most 1970 D coins in everyday circulation lack significant numismatic value beyond their face value. Unless a coin shows clear and recognized error characteristics or is preserved in superb grade, its collector market value remains modest. Most circulated 1970 D pennies, even those with minor visible flaws from wear and tear, trade near 1 cent because of their high original mintage and abundance in society today. Serious coin collectors focus on the few distinguished survivors with clear mint errors, exceptional condition, or verified rarities that stand out from the mass of ordinary specimens. Condition remains a crucial factor in the economic world of coin collecting. Coins graded in mint state or MS condition by professional services such as the Professional Coin Grading Service (PCGS) or Numismatic Guarantee Corporation (NGC) often command much higher prices than ungraded examples because collectors trust the certified condition and authenticity. A 1970D penny graded MS66 red in an error category can be dramatically more valuable than an ordinary circulated piece, sometimes many times over what a typical collector would pay for a non-error coin. While basic Mississippi 65 reds are already more valuable than average examples, the combination of error plus high grade multiplies potential worth because the coin is both rare and remains physically pristine. Because of these factors, the market value for 1970D pennies ranges broadly. At the low end, most circulated coins are worth essentially a penny. In slightly better circulated grades, coins might sell for 20 cents to $1 or $2 if the surfaces remain pleasing. Uncirculated examples in common condition may range from a few dollars up into the tens of dollars depending on eye appeal and toning. Error coins with modest varieties or error types can fetch dozens to a few $100s depending on type and grade, while dramatic error pieces in exceptional condition such as significantly off-center strikes, unusual wrong planchet strikes, or rare repunched mint mark varieties in high certified grade can command hundreds or potentially thousands in collector auctions. In short, the range spans from practically zero premium over face value up to major sums for the rare survivors that speak to the quirks of minting history and collector desire. This wide spectrum of value difference between everyday pennies and rare error or high-grade examples reflects how the numismatic world views coins. A coin's worth is not tied solely to the metal it comprises or the value stamped on its face. Rather, worth emerges from scarcity, condition, error status, and the collective passions of collectors who find meaning in otherwise ordinary objects. The 1970D Lincoln penny serves as a perfect example of this dynamic. Most of these coins were mass-produced for commerce and remain common in circulation, but a rare handful escaped into existence with unusual characteristics that collectors prize and pay for. If you ever find a 1970D penny that looks unusually crisp, has odd design elements, appears struck off-center, shows repunched mint marks, or otherwise deviates from the ordinary, it's worth examining closely with magnification and perhaps consulting a coin expert. Many collectors spend years searching through boxes of pennies for that one extraordinary survivor that tells a history of accidental minting difference and carries value far beyond its humble 1-cent origin. In that journey, a coin that once would have bought a piece of candy or a stamp becomes a piece of American history and a potential treasure in the rich and detailed world of numismatics. You probably think the 1974 Lincoln penny in your pocket is worthless, that it's just one of billions made that year, a tiny copper disc worth exactly 1 cent and nothing more, just loose change to be spent or tossed in a jar. But what if that coin, the humble 1974 Lincoln 1 cent, could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars in the right circumstances? What if a microscopic difference in how it was struck, a rare mistake in the minting process, an unusual mint mark error, or a survival in exceptional condition could transform that everyday penny into a priceless artifact? What if something as common as a penny could secretly be a hidden treasure? Now, we're going deep into the history of the 1974 Lincoln penny, its origin, its place in circulation, and how errors, mistakes, mint mark oddities, and rare varieties can make certain examples much more valuable than their face value. This is the fascinating history of a small coin with a big history. The Lincoln cent has been struck by the United States Mint since 1909, making it one of the longest produced coin designs in American history. It was introduced to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and its designer, Victor David Brenner, created a portrait of Lincoln that broke with the old tradition of symbolic or allegorical figures on U.S. coinage. Instead, the obverse of the coin featured a real historical figure whose legacy loomed large over the nation. For the reverse, the design evolved from wheat ears in the early years to the Lincoln Memorial in 1959, marking the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth and giving the coin a new, instantly recognizable look. By 1974, the Lincoln penny was an established part of everyday commerce. The coin was produced at multiple mint facilities, each identified by a mint mark on the obverse beneath the date. In Philadelphia, the mint struck large numbers of pennies without a mint mark. In Denver, the coins bore a small d. In San Francisco, the mint struck proof coins for collectors, identified by an S. The vast majority of coins from 1974, however, were business strikes meant for circulation dropped into coin trays, pocket change, cash registers, parking meters, vending machines, and coin jars across the country. At the time, pennies were still made from a bronze alloy, roughly 95% copper and 5% zinc. That rich copper composition gave the coins a reddish hue when knew what collectors call red, and a tendency to oxidize to brown over time. This composition would later change in the early 1980s to a copper-plated zinc structure due to rising metal costs, but in 1974 the copper-bronze penny still held a small amount of intrinsic metal value. Because of the enormous numbers struck, the Philadelphia and Denver mints together produced billions of 1974 pennies. Most examples you find today in circulation are not rare and have little intrinsic value beyond face value. A worn, circulated 1974 penny that has been jostled in pocket change for decades typically trades near 1 cent in everyday money, or perhaps a few cents to a collector who wants a clean example for a common date set. That is because there are so many of these coins and so many have survived in worn condition that supply easily meets or exceeds demand for ordinary examples. Collectors distinguish coins by condition through grading. In everyday circulation you see coins described as good, very good, fine, very fine, and so on, with most circulated 1974 pennies falling into the lower end of these categories because decades of handling soften their details. In these grades, the coin's market value rarely exceeds a few cents above face, except for coins that are unusually clean with minimal wear, which might command $1 or $2 in the secondary market because a collector wants a nicer circulated specimen. But when a 1974 penny has never been spent or circulated, its value often rises above face value. Coins that were never used for commerce, that retain full strike detail and much of their original surface sheen, are called uncirculated or mint state, and they are much rarer than the countless worn examples out in circulation. Numismatists assign uncirculated pennies a numeric grade from MS60 up through MS65 and beyond, with higher numbers indicating progressively fewer imperfections, stronger luster, and sharper details. An uncirculated 1974 penny graded MS60 might bring several dollars at auction or sale because collectors value coins that remained out of circulation long enough to preserve their original appearance. Coins graded MS63 or MS64, showing stronger surfaces and fewer marks, often sell for more, and coins graded MS65 or higher with vivid original color and exceptional strike detail can sell for hundreds of dollars. Collectors also pay attention to the color of the coin. Pennies struck in the 1970s came off the press with bright reddish surfaces. Over time, copper oxidizes and many coins lose that red color, turning brown or a mix of red and brown that collectors describe as red-brown. The collector community generally values pennies that retain their original red color more highly than those that have turned fully brown, precisely because the red color indicates original surfaces and less wear or environmental change. A high-grade red 1974 penny uncirculated, with rich original color and well-defined detail is significantly rarer among survivors than the countless brown circulated examples, and that rarity pushes collector premiums upward. Despite the importance of condition, what truly elevates some 1974 Lincoln pennies well above face value are errors, mistakes, mint mark anomalies, and rare varieties. Even in modern coin production, with highly mechanized processes and quality control systems that check millions of coins per day, mistakes happen. When the tools and machines that make coins slip out of tolerance, or when planchets feed incorrectly, or when human oversight intersects with mechanical precision, the result can be coins that differ from the intended design, and those deviations often attract collector interest. One category of such coins is off-center strikes. During the minting process, planchets are fed into the press for striking. If a planchet is not perfectly aligned beneath the dies when struck, part of the design is cut off or pushed to one side, resulting in a coin with a portion of the design missing or incomplete. The degree of off-centering varies. A slight misalignment might not be very noticeable and could be worth only a modest premium, but a coin struck significantly off-center where a large portion of the design is missing can be genuinely eye-catching. In such cases, where the date and mint mark remain intact but the design is clearly shifted, collectors may pay tens or even hundreds of dollars for these visually dramatic errors because they are both unusual and limited relative to the overall population of coins. A related category is the broad strike error. Normally when a coin is struck, the planchet is constrained by a collar that ensures its diameter and edge characteristics are consistent. If the collar fails to engage or misaligns, the metal can flow outward more than intended, producing a slightly larger and flatter coin with weaker detail. A broad-struck 1974 penny will look noticeably different, often slightly oversized and with ill-defined rims, and such errors, when attractive and preserved, can fetch premiums in the error coin market because they are distinct and unmistakable deviations from normal strikes. Another type of minting mistake involves clipped planchets. Planchets are punched from sheets of metal before they go to the press. If a planchet is improperly punched, for example, if the cutting punch overlaps an existing hole or the strip feeds incorrectly, the blank may be missing a curved section along its edge. When that clipped blank is struck with a coin design, the missing portion remains visible as a curved cut or notch in the coin's edge. These clipped planchet errors vary in size and shape, but when they are substantial and the rest of the design remains visible and well struck, they can be appealing to collectors and command premiums ranging from tens to low hundreds of dollars depending on how dramatic the clip is and how well the rest of the coin surfaces survive. Errors in the die itself. The tool that strikes the coin can also produce collectible varieties. Dies are made through a process that transfers the design from a master hub to a working die. If a die receives a poor transfer, suffers damage during production, or begins to crack, coins struck from that die may show those imperfections. A die crack appears as a raised line on the coin's surface that follows the path of the crack in the die, and a die break or cut appears where a portion of the die breaks off entirely, leaving a raised blob or irregular area on the struck coin. Such coins are collectible because they document a moment of tool wear or failure in the minting process, and coins with pronounced, interesting die breaks often sell for dozens or more depending on the severity and how well the rest of the coin survived. Some of the most visually striking and valuable error varieties come from double dies. A double die error arises not at the striking press itself but earlier when the die is being prepared. When the hub that impresses the coin design into the die shifts slightly between impressions, the resulting die surface carries a double image. Coins struck from a double die then show doubling of design elements such as the date, letters in "In God We Trust" or "Liberty," or parts of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. These doubled design features often create a ghosted or overlapping effect that is immediately noticeable. Classic double die pennies, especially those with prominent doubling on the obverse, are among the most prized modern coin varieties. In the 1974 series, confirmed double die obverse and reverses are enthusiastically collected, and high-grade certified examples have sold for hundreds or more depending on the prominence of the doubling and the coin's overall condition. While errors and mistakes happen at random, mint mark anomalies often arise from the way mint marks were physically added to dies in earlier eras. In the 1970s, mint marks were often punched into the die by hand before the dies were used to strike coins. If the mint mark was punched more than once or slipped slightly during punching, this could create a repunched mint mark (RPM) variety where an underlying mint mark is visible beneath a more prominent one. In the case of 1974 Denver pennies, some collectors hunt for repunched D-mint marks where slight doubling or shadowing appears under magnification. These varieties are subtle but are legitimate mint products that can add collectability and value, especially when combined with strong eye appeal and preservation. Perhaps the most intriguing part of the 1974 penny's history, a chapter that has sparked decades of discussion, speculation, and expert investigation, involves the so-called 1974 aluminum cent. In the early 1970s, the price of copper was rising dramatically, and the United States Mint explored alternative metals that could reduce production costs for the penny. Among these experimental materials was aluminum, significantly lighter and less expensive than copper. Mint records indicate that the mint struck aluminum planchets with the Lincoln design as tests at the Philadelphia Mint. These aluminum pieces were not intended for general circulation and were supposed to be destroyed after testing. However, numismatic lore supported by rare reported survivors in private collections holds that a tiny number of these aluminum pattern cents escaped destruction and exist today in the hands of collectors. Authentic aluminum 1974 cents have dramatically different physical characteristics than ordinary bronze pennies. They weigh much less and have a silvery color rather than reddish copper. Their surfaces and edges are distinct because they came from a different alloy and experienced a different striking environment. Because aluminum cents were never officially released, and because only a handful are believed to exist, these coins have become some of the most coveted rarities in modern American numismatics. Verified examples that have been authenticated and certified by reputable grading services have sold at auction for hundreds of thousands of dollars because they are true rarities tied to a fascinating experiment in American mint history. While the aluminum pattern story may be exceptional, the broader field of 1974 penny collecting extends into many other fascinating niches. Some collectors specialize in locating and documenting minor die varieties or cataloging every known error type. Others build registry sets collections that aim to gather every major type and variety of Lincoln cent with the best grades possible. Still others focus on the provenance and auction history of rare examples, creating detailed histories of individual coins that changed hands and influenced market values over time. The market for collectible pennies, including 1974 Lincoln cents, behaves much like other collectible markets. Coins that are common and in worn condition have low or near face value. Coins that are rarer in condition or visually distinctive pull premiums, and coins that are both rare and historically intriguing can command prices far above what most people expect. For a collector, a coin's history, where it was struck, the errors it exhibits, its condition, its mint mark all contribute to value. In everyday commerce, the 1974 Lincoln penny remains a penny. It buys a fraction of a dollar's worth of goods and is exchanged countless times every day. But in the collector's world, its narrative is much larger, a narrative of industrial precision and imperfection, of experimental alloys and mint mark mysteries, of surface preservation and historic continuity. A worn penny in change tells a story of decades of use, while an uncirculated, high-grade, error, or experimental piece tells a story of rarity and value. If you ever find a 1974 Lincoln penny that looks unusually crisp, retains deep original red surfaces, shows a minting anomaly like doubling on letters, an off-center design, a clipped planchet, or an odd edge characteristic, it's worth examining more closely. With a magnifier and some attention to detail, you might just uncover a version of this humble coin that transcends its 1 cent face value, a coin that carries not just monetary worth, but a slice of minting history and collector fascination. You might think a 1974 Lincoln penny is just a mundane relic of older pocket change, something that jingles around loose in a drawer or falls through the cracks of your couch cushion. But what if that tiny coin, nearly forgotten, could unlock a history that spans economic upheaval, experimental materials, mint machinery imperfections, and hidden variations unknown to most casual coin holders? What if that penny could be worth not just 1 cent but hundreds, thousands, or even more, all because of subtle clues left behind by the minting process? What if an ordinary coin you've always overlooked could be hiding an extraordinary tale waiting for you to uncover? In the previous part of this narrative, we explored the basics of the 1974 Lincoln cent's design heritage, its broad circulation in commerce, basic condition worth, how uncirculated examples can exceed face value, and several common types of striking errors that collectors seek. We also discussed the legendary aluminum pattern cents and how they represent one of the most sought-after modern rarities. We now continue deeper into the history, value spectrum, and specific error and variety types so that you can fully understand how and why some of these pennies are so much more valuable than their face value suggests. Most 1974 pennies that remain in circulation today are ordinary coins worn smooth from decades of handling. These coins typically show flattened rims, featureless devices, and little or no original copper red color. In this circulated state, they are essentially worth face value 1 cent for everyday monetary exchange. Even coin collectors who want a circulated example to complete a date and mint mark set might pay only a few cents for a common worn piece because supply vastly exceeds demand for these typical survivors. Collectors and numismatists value survivorship rates, how many examples of a given coin remain in a particular condition, and for coins as common as the 1974 penny, very few surviving coins remain in exceptionally high condition relative to the billions produced. As circulation wears the details off a coin, the steep gradient of condition from worn to uncirculated becomes a key driver of value. In coin grading, condition is evaluated based on luster, strike definition, surface marks, and overall eye appeal. Higher grades are exponentially rarer than lower grades for most coins, and that rarity underpins significant differences in market value. For 1974 Lincoln pennies, the baseline condition values face value for worn coins are only the start of the history. By the time you reach uncirculated coins with original surfaces and strong strikes, prices can be multiples above face value because those condition survivors are much rarer than the worn ones. Add in strike quality designations like full red or red/brown with eye appeal, and values climb further. But we now move into the realm of mint mistakes and anomalies, coins that were not simply well preserved but augmented by mechanical or procedural quirks that make them stand apart. These errors occurred during the minting process itself, and they give certain coins a history that collectors are willing to pay for. One of the most obvious error categories is the off-center strike. On a normal coin, the planchet sits squarely between the obverse and reverse dies and is struck with the full design. But in high-speed mint presses, misfeeds can cause a planchet to slip slightly out of its correct position. When the die falls on that misaligned blank, part of the design is missing or pushed off to one side. The degree to which the strike is off-center matters. A slight off-center coin is perhaps interesting but modestly valued, while a coin where a large section of the design is missing due to a dramatic misalignment can be substantially more collectible. For example, a 1974 penny with half or more of the Lincoln portrait missing from the obverse, yet with the date still legible, is visibly striking and unusual, and such examples have sold in collector markets for tens to hundreds of dollars depending on surface condition and eye appeal. Error collectors often seek these because they are easy to distinguish at a glance and represent true mechanical deviations. Another significant error category is the broad strike error. Under normal minting conditions, a retaining collar holds the blank in place and ensures the coin's proper diameter and edge, including the smooth rim or reeded edge patterns on other denominations. When this collar fails or is absent at the moment of striking, the planchet spreads outward under the force of the dies, producing a broader and flatter coin with weak or distorted designs and often a poorly defined edge. Broad strike pennies are uncommon and visually distinctive, and collectors frequently pay premiums above face value when the error is evident and the rest of the coin surfaces are visually attractive. A third category of common planchet defects involves clipped planchets. Planchets are punched from metal strips before being fed to striking presses. If the blanking mechanism misfeeds or overlaps punches, the resulting planchet can be missing a curved segment or present an irregular edge before striking. When such a defective blank is struck with the Lincoln cent design, the missing portion remains a permanent part of the coin's rim configuration. These coins are visually intriguing and collectible because they represent a planchet error that was never corrected prior to striking. Clipped planchet cents from 1974 have sold for a few dozen to several dozen dollars depending on the severity of the clip and the remaining surface eye appeal. Beyond mechanical errors that leave clear visual evidence, there are also more subtle anomalies tied to the dies themselves. Dies are manufactured through a multi-step process that transfers design elements from a master hub to working dies. When this process experiences slight misalignments or imperfections, it can leave telltale doubling or geometric irregularities in the dies that then transfer to the coins they strike. One well-known die-related category is the doubled die. A doubled die arises when the hubbing process, the transfer of the design into the die, impresses the design more than once with slight shifts between impressions. As a result, coins struck from that die show overlapping or shadowed design elements, typically visible under magnification or even to the naked eye. Double die coins are among the most sought-after errors because they represent a distinct anomaly at the die production level rather than at the striking press. On 1974 Lincoln cents, double die obverse and double die reverses have been documented. On the obverse, doubling may appear in Lincoln's portrait, in the date digits, or in the words "In God We Trust" and "Liberty." On the reverse, doubling can affect the narrow lettering around the Lincoln Memorial design "United States of America, e pluribus unum," and 1 cent and the architectural lines of the memorial itself. Depending on how dramatic and visible the doubling is, these coins can sell for hundreds of dollars or more, particularly when certified by a reputable grading service and presented in high grade with strong surfaces that accentuate the doubled features. Mint mark varieties are another way that 1974 pennies can be collectible. In 1974 most business strike coins were produced at Philadelphia and Denver. The Philadelphia coins lack a mint mark, Denver coins carry a small "D" beneath the date. Mint marks were physically punched into the dies during preparation in that era, and occasionally the mint mark itself was mis-punched or repunched, leaving ghosted impressions or doubled mint mark appearances. These repunched mint mark RPM varieties are subtle and require magnification in comparison to normal examples, but they are legitimate products of the minting process rather than post-mint damage. Collectors who specialize in die varieties often seek these RPMs, and the coins with clear, documented repunching can sell for tens to low hundreds of dollars depending on rarity and condition. In addition to the obvious error and mint mark categories, there are rarer anomalies tied to experimental strikes and broader changes in economic conditions. The early 1970s were a period of rising copper prices, which directly affected the cost of making pennies. Because of that rising cost, the United States Mint conducted experiments with alternative metals to reduce production expenses. One of the most notable experiments was with aluminum planchets, which were struck to test the feasibility of producing pennies in a lighter, cheaper metal. According to mint documentation and records from the period, thousands of aluminum blanks were struck with the Lincoln cent design at the Philadelphia Mint in 1974 as part of this experimental program. These aluminum cents were not intended for release into circulation and were ordered destroyed once the testing concluded. However, numismatic history tells the history of a handful of these aluminum trial pieces that survived outside of official destruction, perhaps taken as test pieces by mint workers or escaping into the collecting market through other means. Because aluminum pennies have a completely different weight, color, and density compared to the standard bronze composition, these experimental survivors are instantly distinguishable and dramatically rare. Authenticated aluminum 1974 cents are among the rarest modern American coins and have become legends among serious collectors. When genuine specimens have been authenticated and graded by major coin grading services, they have sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars precisely because so few are known to exist. These coins are not just errors, they are prototypes of a composition that was tested and then abandoned, remnants of an economic experiment frozen in time. For collectors, such pieces connect directly to the historical conditions of the era: rising metal costs, attempts to economize coin production, and the rarely seen prototype strikes that never went into circulation. Alongside these rare experimental coins, there are other historical footnotes that give depth to the 1974 pennies narrative. Some collectors focus on proof coins from San Francisco, which were struck with special dies and polished planchets to produce mirror-like surfaces. Proof coins were primarily intended for collectors rather than circulation and often came in annual sets sold directly by the mint. Because proof coins were handled carefully and purposefully stored, they tend to retain excellent condition compared to the millions of business strikes that circulated. A 1974 proof Lincoln penny in pristine condition, especially if certified by a grading service, can command a premium over an ordinary business strike uncirculated coin, selling for tens to low hundreds of dollars depending on condition and finish. Contrast, the difference between ordinary circulated coins and these rarer examples illustrates how numismatic value diverges from face value. In circulation, the 1974 penny's role was simple: to make up 1 cent of change, to facilitate small transactions, and to be passed from hand to hand over years of everyday use. In that context, the vast majority of these pennies remain worth nearly their 1 cent face value because supply far outstrips demand for average circulated examples. but when you move beyond circulation to condition, mint errors, experimental varieties, and mint mark subtleties, the landscape of value changes dramatically. A coin that remains in uncirculated condition with original red surfaces and crisp detail is worth more because it is rarer among survivors. A coin that exhibits an off-center strike, a clipped planchet, or doubling is worth more because it represents an identifiable anomaly that is absent from the majority of coins struck that year. A coin with a rare mint mark variety is worth more because it displays a variant of production that few collectors possess. And a coin from a rare experimental series, such as an authenticated aluminum cent, can be worth many times more because it connects to a unique moment in mint history that most collectors will never encounter. The collecting community also places value on provenance and historical documentation. Coins that can be tied to a documented history, that have certified pedigrees, or that have known places in numismatic literature or auction history often bring higher prices. Auction records for rare coins are tracked carefully, and collectors compare past sale prices to gauge how much a similar coin might sell for today. Values in the coin market are not static, they fluctuate with collector demand, economic conditions, and the discovery of new examples. Coins that once traded for tens of dollars can surge into the hundreds if a visually striking unexplained error is discovered, if grading service populations indicate scarcity at high grades, or if a coin becomes part of a broader narrative embraced by the collector community. Through all these factors: condition, strike quality, die and planchet errors, mint mark anomalies, experimental composition survivors, and collector demand, the 1974 Lincoln cent shows how a seemingly mundane coin can have a broad spectrum of values. On one end are billions of worn circulated pennies worth their face value in everyday commerce. On the other end are extraordinary error coins and rare survivors worth prices that dwarf that face value by orders of magnitude. In between lies a wide field of uncirculated coins, color varieties, graded survivors, and documented errors that populate the marketplace for collectors and enthusiasts. The history of the 1974 Lincoln penny is not just about economics or metal. It is about industrial history, chance mechanical variation, artistic design that has endured for decades, and the passion of collectors who look beyond face value to find the hidden narratives embedded in everyday objects. It is a reminder that even the smallest pieces of metal, tossed casually in a change tray or saved in a coin album, can carry rich histories and surprising value when seen through the lens of human curiosity and historical context. If you ever find a 1974 penny that glows with original surfaces, seems oddly struck, or shows an unfamiliar variation, take a moment to examine it closely. You might just be holding more than spare change. You could be holding a piece of a much larger story. Beyond the more common error types like off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, and double dies, the 1974 Lincoln cent also shows subtle die cracks and cuds that capture the attention of specialized collectors. A die crack occurs when a working die begins to develop fissures under the immense pressure of repeated strikes. These cracks transfer to the coins as raised lines or irregular textures that follow the fissure in the die. Some cracks appear faint, almost invisible without magnification, while others are dramatic and can run across large portions of the coin's surface. Coins with prominent die cracks often attract collector interest because they are tangible evidence of the mechanical stresses experienced by the minting equipment, and because they are unique. Each crack pattern is specific to the die from which the coin was struck. Cuds are a related phenomenon. When a portion of the die breaks away entirely, the coins struck from that die develop a raised blob or irregular area where the design should be. A cud is often immediately visible to the naked eye and can create unusual and visually distinctive coins. For a 1974 Lincoln penny, a cud near the rim or along the obverse field can make the coin instantly collectible. Market value for coins with dramatic die cracks or cuds varies depending on size, location, and surface quality, ranging from a few dollars for minor examples to hundreds for coins with strong eye appeal and uncirculated surfaces. The concept of variety collecting also extends to subtle design changes that may have occurred during production in 1974. While the Lincoln cent had a stable obverse and reverse design that year, minute differences in die engraving or hub impressions can produce variations that are catalogued by serious numismatists. These include differences in letter spacing, serifs, and the width of the date numerals. Collectors specializing in varieties use photographic comparison, magnification, and certified references to identify and verify these differences. While minor, such distinctions can significantly affect value because they demonstrate die anomalies and provide a window into the minting process. Market trends for 1974 pennies also reveal an interesting psychology among collectors. The Lincoln cent is one of the most widely collected coins in the United States, and many collectors attempt to assemble date and mint mark sets, as well as type sets, proof sets, and error collections. The commonality of 1974 pennies in circulated condition means that the challenge is not finding a coin at face value, but finding one in exceptional condition, with original red surfaces, or with a rare error or variety. This scarcity relative to the billion struck drives demand and creates premiums in the collector market. Auction history underscores this point. Ordinary circulated 1974 pennies consistently sell at or near face value in coin shops or small auctions. Uncirculated examples graded by reputable services like PCGS or NGC can sell for several dollars to over $10 depending on grade. Higher-grade uncirculated coins with full red surfaces MS65 and above regularly achieve prices from $50 to several $100s. Coins exhibiting off-center strikes, dramatic double dies, clipped planchets, or die cuts often sell for hundreds of dollars in specialized auctions. Aluminum pattern cents, when authenticated and offered in auctions, have historically sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars due to their extreme rarity. Collector psychology plays a crucial role in these values. Coins with visible errors or unusual characteristics are prized not only for scarcity but for narrative and visual appeal. The dramatic appearance of an off-center strike, the ghosted impression of a double die, or the bright, uncirculated red color of a preserved coin creates an emotional response in collectors. Unlike many collectibles where condition or brand dominates value, coins combine artistry, history, and tangible anomalies to engage collectors. That engagement drives demand, which in turn drives prices above what simple supply and demand metrics might predict. The broader cultural context of the 1970s also adds interest to the 1974 Lincoln cent. This was a period of economic challenge, including rising copper prices, which directly influenced the U.S. Mint's experimentation with alternative compositions. It was also a time when coin collecting was gaining popularity, with educational programs, coin clubs, and periodicals proliferating in the United States. As such, the 1974 penny exists not just as a currency artifact, but as a marker of a particular moment in American numismatic culture and industrial history. Collectors often value coins with this broader historical resonance in addition to physical characteristics like condition and minting anomalies. Another dimension that impacts value is population data and certification trends. When grading services certify coins, they record the number of coins graded at each level. For 1974 Lincoln cents, the vast majority of submitted coins are lower-grade circulated examples, reflecting the reality of what survives from circulation. Uncirculated coins graded MS64 and above are relatively scarce. Errors such as double dies, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and die cracks are rarer still. The smaller the population, the higher the perceived value to collectors seeking to assemble complete sets or showcase distinctive examples in their collections. Certification ensures authenticity and verifies condition, which is critical in maintaining market confidence and commanding higher prices. The interplay of rarity, condition, and historical significance creates a wide spectrum of potential market values for the 1974 Lincoln penny. A heavily circulated coin, brown and worn smooth, may only be worth a cent or two. A clean uncirculated coin, red and well struck, can be worth up to several $100s. A dramatic mint error like an off-center strike or double die may fetch hundreds of dollars. A certified aluminum pattern cent, verified and authenticated, can sell for hundreds of thousands. Each of these values exists in a continuum where condition, uniqueness, and provenance intersect to determine market perception and collector enthusiasm. Educational and reference resources for collectors help contextualize these values. Numismatic guides, coin price books, and specialized error manuals document the known varieties, population data, auction results, and market trends for coins like the 1974 Lincoln cent. Collectors use these tools to identify potential errors, assess condition, compare coins to reference images, and make informed buying or selling decisions. This level of scholarship reflects the seriousness with which collectors approach what might otherwise appear to be a mundane piece of pocket change. Even casual collectors benefit from awareness of the potential for value in their coins. Simply examining a 1974 penny with a magnifying glass, checking the date and mint mark, and observing for anomalies in the letters, edges, and overall strike can reveal coins that might command significantly more than their 1 cent face value. With millions of these pennies in circulation, the odds of finding an unusual error or a high-grade survivor in loose change are small, but the possibility exists, and that potential is part of the allure that makes the 1974 Lincoln penny a coin of interest, not just a medium of exchange. The story of the 1974 Lincoln penny thus spans design heritage, economic context, mechanical anomalies, experimental materials, condition rarity, and market dynamics. It embodies a journey from the minting presses to everyday commerce, through decades of wear and handling, into the hands of collectors who value condition, errors, and history. It illustrates how even a seemingly ordinary coin can carry a spectrum of meaning and value far beyond its face. The penny is both humble and extraordinary, humble in its original purpose as currency, extraordinary in the surprises that careful observation and historical understanding can reveal. In conclusion, the 1974 Lincoln penny demonstrates the interplay between commonality and rarity, circulation and preservation, error and perfection. Its journey from a copper-bronze blank to a minted coin, sometimes ordinary and sometimes unique, reflects not just the mechanics of coin production but the economic, artistic, and cultural currents of its time. Collectors prize these coins for their stories, their anomalies, and their preservation. Value, in the world of numismatics, is not intrinsic alone, it is also historical, psychological, and narrative. That is why a 1974 penny can be a 1-cent coin in your pocket, a collectible worth hundreds in a market, or even a legendary aluminum pattern piece commanding 6-figure sums, all depending on its condition, anomalies, and history. For anyone interested in the 1974 Lincoln penny, the lesson is clear: look closely, think historically, consider condition and anomalies, and appreciate that even the smallest coin can hide a complex story of American minting, economy, and collecting culture. Each coin is a fragment of history, a testament to the processes of creation, circulation, survival, and discovery. Whether your coin is ordinary or extraordinary, it connects you to decades of numismatic heritage and a rich continuum of value that extends far beyond its simple face.